Daniel had always believed in keeping his life simple and organized, following every rule, paying attention to every little detail, and never wanting to make waves in his quiet neighborhood of Maplewood. He loved the calm mornings when the sun would rise and paint golden light across the lawns, the sound of birds chirping from tree branches swaying gently in the wind, and the occasional laughter of children playing down the street. Daniel worked as a software consultant, spending his weekdays typing at his computer, solving problems and helping companies organize their data, but he treasured his evenings at home, especially the moments he shared with his wife, Emily. Emily was a strong, confident woman who worked as a city police officer, dedicated to keeping the community safe and protecting people from trouble, and Daniel admired her for her courage and commitment, even if he sometimes worried about her late-night shifts. Their home was a modest one-story house with a freshly painted white fence, a small garden full of colorful flowers, and a driveway that Daniel took pride in keeping spotless. He mowed the lawn every Saturday morning without fail, trimmed the bushes so that every branch stood straight, and even swept the porch to make sure it was clean enough to welcome visitors. Life in Maplewood had always been predictable, and Daniel liked it that way, feeling a deep sense of comfort in the routines he and Emily had built together. However, that particular afternoon, everything felt different, as though the calm bubble he had worked so hard to maintain was about to be tested. He had just finished watering the roses in the backyard, their petals glistening from the fresh droplets, when a sudden, sharp knock echoed from the front door, startling him. Daniel wasn't used to unexpected visitors. The few times neighbors had stopped by, it was always for friendly greetings or borrowed sugar. Wiping his hands on a towel, he walked slowly toward the door, curiosity mixed with a flicker of unease. As he opened it, he was met with the sight of two uniformed officers standing on his porch, both wearing serious expressions and looking slightly tense. Their presence immediately made Daniel's heart beat a little faster. "Sir, we've received complaints about your property," one of the officers said in a formal tone, his voice firm but not unkind. Daniel frowned, confusion crossing his face. Complaints? What could they possibly mean? He had followed every rule. He had ensured his mailbox was painted the correct color, his grass was cut to the exact height required by the HOA, and even the small decorative stones in his garden were arranged neatly in straight lines. Nothing in his home could be considered out of order, at least according to the community guidelines he had always respected. Complaints? Daniel asked cautiously, his voice calm, though a sense of tension began to rise in his chest. About what? The officers glanced at each other briefly before one cleared his throat. "There's been a report of a violation concerning the fence line and the garden decorations," the first officer replied, his tone careful, as though trying not to upset him further. Daniel blinked in disbelief. A violation? He had double-checked the HOA rules just last week and knew for certain that his fence and garden were completely compliant. It felt absurd that someone could take issue with the care and attention he had given to his own property. As he opened his mouth to respond, a movement behind him caught the officer's attention. Emily stepped out from the side hallway, her presence commanding and unmistakable. But this wasn't the Emily Daniel normally saw lounging in her casual clothes or baking in the kitchen. Today, she was dressed in her full police uniform, her badge shining against the navy fabric, her belt neatly holding the equipment she carried every day on duty. The officer's eyes widened in recognition and surprise, and for a brief moment, they seemed frozen in place, unsure of how to proceed. Daniel felt a rush of pride mixed with amusement as he watched their reactions, realizing that the woman standing behind him could instantly shift the power in the room without raising her voice. "Good afternoon, officers. How can I help you?" Emily asked, her voice calm, confident, and carrying the authority she always exuded on duty. The officers shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that they were no longer speaking to an ordinary homeowner but to someone trained to handle tense situations with experience and precision. The first officer stammered, "We received a complaint, about the property." Emily nodded politely, her eyes scanning the fence and the garden as if confirming the details herself, though she had already noted the obvious: everything was in order. Daniel could sense the officer's unease as Emily asked a few carefully chosen questions, her tone professional but firm. She listened to their explanations, which seemed to stumble under the weight of her presence, and then calmly addressed each concern with precise knowledge of the HOA regulations, clearly demonstrating that there was no basis for the complaint. Daniel's admiration for his wife grew with every passing second, realizing that her calm confidence had completely disarmed the officers, leaving them unsure of how to continue without appearing foolish. He could see the sweat forming at the hairline of the younger officer and the shifting stance of the senior one, both trying to find a way to regain control of the situation. Emily, however, remained composed, her posture relaxed yet authoritative, her hands resting naturally at her sides, her gaze steady and unwavering. She explained the rules clearly, pointing out the measurements of the fence and the arrangement of the garden, showing that every aspect of their property was fully compliant and that the complaint had no merit. The officers mumbled apologies, their voices low and hesitant, clearly aware that they had misjudged the situation entirely. Daniel's mind raced as he realized that this incident, which had started with a simple knock on the door, had turned into a moment that would never be forgotten. He felt a mixture of relief, amusement, and profound gratitude for having Emily by his side, not just as a wife, but as someone who could protect him and their home with strength and integrity. As the officers finally stepped back, clearly unsure of how to continue, Daniel opened the door wider, inviting them to leave, and Emily offered a polite, firm, "Have a good day," her tone leaving no room for argument. Once the officers were gone, Daniel closed the door, leaning against it as he exhaled deeply, feeling the tension drain from his body. He turned to Emily, a smile spreading across his face despite the lingering adrenaline. "Wow," he said, half laughing, half amazed. "You handled that perfectly." Emily smiled back, her eyes warm, and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "I just wanted to make sure they didn't intimidate you," she said softly. "Sometimes, people forget that following the rules doesn't mean they can scare others." Daniel nodded, feeling a deep sense of love and admiration for the woman beside him. In that moment, he realized that life in Maplewood might seem quiet and predictable, but it could also bring unexpected challenges that tested patience, courage, and partnership. And as he looked around their carefully tended yard, the bright flowers swaying in the breeze, and the neatly trimmed fence standing tall under the sunlight, he understood that no matter what rules or complaints came their way, they would face them together, strong, united, and unshaken. After the officers finally left, Daniel and Emily stood for a moment in the quiet of their living room, listening to the distant sounds of children playing in the neighborhood and the occasional hum of cars driving past. The tension from earlier still lingered in Daniel's chest, though it had been replaced with a mixture of relief and admiration for Emily's calm strength. Emily took off her hat, letting her hair fall naturally around her shoulders, and leaned against the kitchen counter, her uniform still crisp and neat. "I think they will think twice before sending anyone to our house again," she said with a soft laugh, the corners of her eyes crinkling in amusement. Daniel nodded, still marveling at how effortlessly she had handled the situation, turning what could have been a stressful confrontation into a moment that left the officers clearly embarrassed but without hostility. He poured them both a glass of water, and they sat together on the small couch in their living room, letting the silence settle between them, comfortable and full of unspoken gratitude. As they sipped their drinks, Daniel's thoughts wandered to the HOA, wondering who had filed the complaint and why someone would go to such lengths over something as trivial as a fence and a few garden decorations. He had always kept a friendly relationship with the neighborhood association, attending meetings occasionally and following their requests without question, and he couldn't imagine any real conflict arising. But Emily, noticing the shadow of concern on his face, reached over and held his hand. "Don't worry about it," she said gently. "Most of these complaints come from misunderstandings or people trying to assert control. We don't need to let them affect us." Daniel smiled, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He realized that in life, small conflicts often felt much larger until someone reminded you of perspective and confidence. That afternoon, Daniel decided to take a walk around the yard, running his hands along the white fence, checking the neat rows of flowers, and breathing in the scent of the freshly watered garden. Everything looked perfect, just as it should, and yet he felt a strange mixture of vulnerability and protection. Vulnerability because someone had dared to question his home and his choices, and protection because Emily was there, unwavering, a reminder that they were stronger together. Emily joined him in the garden, and they spent a few quiet minutes talking about their day, sharing small stories and laughing at the silly moments that made life lighter. Then, Emily's phone rang, and she excused herself to take the call. Daniel watched her walk toward the living room, moving with the confident grace that made her presence so commanding. He could hear her speaking softly but firmly, her voice carrying authority even over the phone. Moments later, she returned, a faint frown on her face. "That was headquarters," she said, her expression serious but controlled. "They want me to follow up on a small issue with another complaint in the neighborhood, nothing urgent, but they're sending me out." Daniel nodded, understanding that her job often called her away, and he respected the commitment she had to protecting others, even when it meant leaving the safety of their home temporarily. "I'll be fine here," he reassured her. "You do your work, and I'll handle things if anyone comes around." Emily smiled, leaning in to kiss his forehead. "I know you will. But remember, you don't have to face anything alone." The reassurance warmed Daniel's heart. Later that evening, as the sun began to set and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Daniel returned to the porch with a blanket to enjoy the calm of the neighborhood. The breeze was gentle, rustling the leaves of the tall trees lining the street, and the familiar sights of Maplewood brought a sense of peace he hadn't felt since the unexpected confrontation with the officers. He thought about how quickly life could change, how a routine afternoon could suddenly introduce tension and uncertainty, and how important it was to have someone by your side who could anchor you in moments of unpredictability. Emily joined him a little while later, back from her call, her uniform neatly hung now, replaced by casual clothes that made her look relaxed and approachable. They sat side by side, watching the sky shift from orange to deep blue, sharing silence and the comforting presence of each other. Daniel reflected on how fortunate he was to have Emily, not just as his wife, but as a partner who embodied strength, courage, and calm reasoning. The events of the day had revealed something essential, that life's challenges, whether small or large, could be faced with composure when there was trust and support between two people. As darkness settled over Maplewood, the quiet was occasionally broken by distant laughter or the hum of a passing car, but Daniel felt a sense of security he hadn't known before. The confrontation with the HOA and the officers could have been a stressful ordeal, but it had become a lesson in perspective, partnership, and confidence. Daniel knew that even in moments when rules were questioned, and misunderstandings arose, having someone strong, smart, and steady by his side made all the difference. He glanced at Emily, who was now holding a cup of tea, her eyes reflecting the fading light of the day, and he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. They had faced the unexpected together, and their bond had only grown stronger. As the night deepened and the stars began to appear, Daniel realized that life in Maplewood was more than just following rules and keeping appearances. It was about trust, courage, and standing together through challenges, small or large. He felt a quiet pride in their home, their shared lives, and the unspoken strength that came from facing difficulties side by side. And as he leaned back, letting the night air cool his skin and listening to the peaceful sounds of the neighborhood, he knew that whatever tomorrow brought, whether more complaints, unexpected visits, or routine challenges, they would handle it together, united, confident, and unshakable. The calm that had once seemed ordinary now felt precious, and Daniel cherished the knowledge that it was built on more than a neatly trimmed lawn or a painted fence. It was built on love, respect, and the shared courage that Emily and he carried every day, a reminder that true strength often comes from standing together in the face of uncertainty. The next morning, Daniel woke to the sound of birds singing outside the window, a gentle reminder that life continued its calm rhythm despite the unexpected events of the previous day. He stretched and made his way to the kitchen, where the sunlight poured in, warming the small, cozy space. Emily was already there, her uniform neatly pressed, ready for her morning briefing at the station. She greeted him with a bright smile, one that carried warmth and reassurance, and Daniel felt his heart lift instantly. Today, however, he knew something was different. There was an unspoken energy in the air, a sense that the neighborhood, the HOA, and even the officers from yesterday would not forget their encounter. As they shared breakfast, Emily explained that she would have to deal with another minor issue in the neighborhood, but she promised she would handle it calmly and professionally, just as she had the day before. Daniel listened carefully, admiring her commitment, but also feeling a flicker of concern. He knew how easily small matters could escalate when people didn't understand the rules or the intent behind them. After breakfast, Daniel decided to take a walk around the property once again, checking the fence, the flower beds, and the neatly arranged garden stones, just to reassure himself that everything remained perfect. As he stepped out into the driveway, he noticed a few neighbors peering from behind curtains or through windows, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and surprise. Word of the previous day's confrontation had traveled fast, and Daniel realized that everyone was now watching, some with admiration and some with doubt about the HOA's actions. He felt a strange mix of embarrassment and pride. The events were personal, yet they had become a quiet spectacle in the neighborhood. Emily joined him, adjusting the strap of her bag before heading out to her vehicle, ready to attend to her duties. "Don't worry," she said with a reassuring smile. "I'll handle everything, and you just keep things in order here." Daniel nodded, grateful for her confidence and the trust she placed in him. He watched her drive away, the sunlight reflecting off the polished surface of her police car, and felt a renewed sense of responsibility to maintain their home, not just for themselves but as a symbol of order and respect in the neighborhood. The morning passed slowly, and Daniel found himself performing small tasks around the house, sweeping the porch, tidying the garden, and even fixing a small loose board on the fence. Every action felt purposeful, a way to honor the calm and beauty of their home while keeping his mind occupied. As he worked, he reflected on the reactions of the officers and neighbors, realizing that respect often came from confidence, knowledge, and the courage to act when necessary. By mid-afternoon, Daniel heard footsteps approaching from the street. He looked up to see Mr. Thompson, one of the older neighbors who often complained about minor things, walking cautiously toward him. Daniel straightened and smiled politely. "Good afternoon, Mr. Thompson," he greeted, trying to keep the interaction as calm and friendly as possible. The older man hesitated for a moment before speaking. I heard about what happened yesterday," he said, his voice low and unsure. "I didn't expect, well, I didn't expect her to be, you know." Daniel followed his gaze toward the direction Emily had left, realizing the older man was trying to describe her authority without offending. Daniel nodded slowly. "Emily is very capable," he said simply, letting his calm confidence carry the weight of his words. "We follow the rules, but we also expect respect for everyone in the neighborhood." Mr. Thompson nodded, a slight blush on his cheeks, and muttered an apology before walking away, clearly reassessing his own judgment. Daniel returned to his garden, feeling a quiet satisfaction that even the most skeptical neighbors were beginning to understand that respect was earned through calm strength and knowledge, not intimidation or complaints. As the afternoon sun began to lower, Daniel heard the familiar hum of Emily's car returning. She stepped out with her usual calm grace, her presence immediately bringing a sense of relief and security. "Everything went smoothly," she said, removing her bag and tucking it inside the house. "A few questions, a few concerns, but nothing serious. The people involved understood the rules and realized there was no violation." Daniel smiled, feeling both pride and relief. He knew that Emily's actions not only protected their home but also subtly reminded the neighborhood of the importance of fairness and understanding. Together, they walked through the yard, checking the garden and fence once more, their presence side by side creating a sense of strength and unity that Daniel had never felt so clearly before. The evening approached, and the neighborhood was bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Children played outside, neighbors waved from their porches, and the air was filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. Daniel and Emily sat on their porch, sipping cold drinks and talking quietly about the day. "You know," Daniel said thoughtfully, "I think people are finally beginning to see what really matters here. Not rules for the sake of rules, but fairness, understanding, and respect." Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting the warm light of the sunset. "Exactly," she agreed. "Sometimes, people forget that being firm and standing for what is right doesn't mean being harsh. It just means being confident in your actions." Daniel leaned back, feeling the gentle breeze on his face and the quiet strength of their home surrounding him. He realized that the events of the past 2 days had taught him more about courage, partnership, and community than he had ever imagined. As darkness began to settle and the first stars appeared in the sky, Daniel understood that life in Maplewood was more than just quiet streets and neatly trimmed lawns. It was about trust, support, and standing together in the face of unexpected challenges. And with Emily by his side, he knew that whatever conflicts or surprises came their way, they would face them together, with confidence, calm, and unwavering strength, ready to protect not only their home but the peace and respect they had worked so hard to maintain. The lessons of the day lingered in his mind, that patience and courage could turn fear into understanding, that kindness combined with strength earned respect, and that true security came from standing together, ready to meet any challenge with a clear mind and a brave heart, just as he and Emily had done time and time again. The following morning, Daniel woke with a sense of anticipation he could not explain. The events of the past few days had changed something in the neighborhood, and he could feel it in the air as he stepped onto the porch, sipping his morning coffee and watching the sun cast long shadows across the quiet streets. He noticed a few neighbors outside, tending to their lawns or walking dogs, their eyes occasionally flicking toward his house as if measuring the calm confidence they had witnessed from him and Emily. Daniel felt a mixture of pride and unease. While he was grateful for the newfound respect, he also knew that change could stir curiosity, jealousy, or misunderstandings, and he wanted to ensure that everything remained peaceful. Emily joined him shortly. Her uniform hung neatly in the closet, replaced by casual clothes, though her presence carried the same quiet authority and strength that had left the officers speechless days earlier. She smiled warmly at him, handing him a fresh cup of coffee, and they shared a few quiet moments together, enjoying the calm before the day unfolded. It was then that Daniel noticed a small group of HOA representatives walking down the street toward his house, their expression serious, their posture cautious. His stomach tightened slightly, but Emily, sensing his concern, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay calm," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "We know the rules, we follow them, and we are prepared to answer any questions." Daniel nodded, drawing courage from her words. As the representatives approached, Daniel stepped forward to greet them, his posture relaxed yet confident, while Emily remained just behind him, a steady presence. "Good morning," Daniel said politely, his voice even and firm. "How can I help you today?" One of the representatives, a middle-aged man with a clipboard, cleared his throat. "We received another complaint about your property," he began, glancing nervously at Emily, "and we wanted to inspect and discuss it before taking further action." Daniel tilted his head, listening carefully, while Emily silently observed, her calm demeanor making it clear that they were not to be underestimated. "Of course," Daniel replied, keeping his tone measured. "Everything is in order, but please feel free to review it. I am confident you will find that the property fully complies with the guidelines." The representatives hesitated, their eyes flicking toward Emily, who stood quietly behind Daniel, her posture upright, her expression calm yet authoritative. It was clear that her presence was having the same effect as before, making the group second-guess the seriousness of their complaint and their approach. Emily stepped forward slightly, her hands clasped in front of her, and spoke in a firm but polite tone. "We welcome your inspection, but I would advise clarity and fairness in all observations. Any complaints must be based on real concerns, not assumptions or minor preferences. We expect proper adherence to the rules, as we always provide." Her words hung in the air, and Daniel could see the shift in the representatives' expressions from confidence to hesitation, as if they suddenly realized they had been overly zealous. One of them cleared his throat and began taking notes more cautiously, while the others nodded quietly, clearly reconsidering their approach. Daniel led them through the yard, pointing out the fence, the flower beds, and the garden decorations, explaining how each element complied fully with the HOA regulations. Emily stayed close, her presence both reassuring to Daniel and subtly commanding respect from the visitors. By the time they finished their inspection, the representatives were visibly relieved that there was no real violation. One of them muttered an apology, another offered a quiet nod of acknowledgement, and the middle-aged man with the clipboard finally sighed, putting it away. "We see that everything is in order," he admitted. "Thank you for your patience and cooperation." Daniel and Emily exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of teamwork and mutual trust that had carried them through another challenge. After the representatives left, Daniel felt a wave of relief, mixed with admiration for Emily's unwavering composure. "You handled that perfectly again," he said, shaking his head slightly in amazement. Emily smiled, a faint blush on her cheeks, and placed a hand on his arm. "It's not just me," she said softly. "It's us together. Confidence, calm, and knowledge make all the difference." The afternoon unfolded with a renewed sense of peace. Daniel returned to small tasks around the house, feeling a new sense of purpose in each action. He repaired a loose gate hinge, swept the driveway, and even planted a few new flowers along the fence line, each activity a quiet celebration of order and stability. Emily, meanwhile, completed her duties at the station and returned home, sharing stories of minor neighborhood concerns she had addressed with fairness and professionalism, further strengthening Daniel's appreciation for her dedication. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, neighbors passed by, some nodding in respect, others smiling politely. It was clear that the events of the past days had left an impression. Maplewood was a neighborhood where fairness and respect were recognized, and Daniel and Emily had become symbols of calm strength and integrity. Sitting together on their porch, sipping evening tea, Daniel reflected on the journey of the last few days. From a simple knock on the door to confrontations with officers and HOA representatives, they had faced every challenge with patience, knowledge, and unity. He realized that respect was not demanded but earned, and that calm authority could diffuse tension faster than anger or argument. Emily leaned back in her chair, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear, and Daniel felt a deep sense of gratitude for the partnership they shared. Life in Maplewood had shown him that even the quietest neighborhoods could present challenges, that misunderstandings could escalate quickly, and that having someone by your side who combined strength, wisdom, and calm courage made all the difference. Together, they had turned potential conflict into lessons of understanding and respect, showing the community that order and kindness could coexist with authority and firmness. As night fell and the neighborhood grew quiet, Daniel and Emily remained on their porch, wrapped in the comfort of their home and each other. Daniel knew that challenges would come again, but he also knew that with Emily by his side, they could face anything together, standing tall and confident, a team ready to protect their home, their peace, and the respect they had worked so hard to maintain. The events of the past days had transformed more than just their reputation, they had strengthened the bond between Daniel and Emily, reminding them that courage, partnership, and integrity were the true foundations of a happy, secure life in Maplewood. The next morning, Daniel woke feeling a quiet sense of anticipation, a realization that the past days had changed their life in Maplewood more than he had expected. The neighborhood felt different somehow, lighter yet more attentive, as if the residents had begun to understand that calm confidence and fairness mattered as much as rules themselves. Daniel stepped onto the porch, the early sunlight casting a warm glow across the yard, and noticed neighbors outside, tending to their gardens or walking dogs, glancing occasionally in his direction with expressions that were a mixture of curiosity and respect. He felt a sense of pride, but also a deep responsibility. The events with the HOA and the officers had taught him that their home was more than just a house, it was a symbol of order, care, and shared values. Emily appeared behind him, dressed casually but with the same air of quiet authority that Daniel had come to admire and rely upon. She handed him a cup of coffee, her smile calm and reassuring, and they shared a few moments of silence, watching the neighborhood slowly come to life with the sounds of children laughing, birds singing, and the faint hum of morning traffic. "Do you feel it too?" Daniel asked softly. "The way things have changed." Emily nodded, her eyes reflecting the early light, calm yet sharp, understanding exactly what he meant. "Yes," she said. "People are starting to see that respect and fairness are important. And that confidence, when paired with kindness, makes all the difference." Daniel felt a sense of relief mixed with gratitude. The past days had been tense, filled with uncertainty and small confrontations, but now the neighborhood seemed more connected, more understanding. He realized that Emily's presence, her calm strength and professional approach, had not only protected their home but had also set an example for everyone around them. As they walked through the yard together, Daniel reflected on the incidents that had unfolded, the knock on the door that had brought officers to their home, the careful way Emily had handled them, the subsequent visits from the HOA representatives, and the way both of them had remained composed and united through every interaction. Each moment had reinforced lessons about patience, courage, and partnership. By mid-morning, a few neighbors came over, hesitating at first, but eventually greeting Daniel and Emily with polite smiles and small talk. Some complimented their well-maintained yard, others admitted they had misunderstood the HOA rules themselves, and a few simply thanked them for showing grace and patience in handling what could have been uncomfortable situations. Daniel realized that their actions had quietly inspired respect in the neighborhood, not through confrontation or loud words, but through calm confidence, honesty, and the willingness to stand firm while remaining kind. Emily stayed by his side, gently steering conversations, offering answers, and ensuring that interactions remained positive. Daniel watched her, feeling admiration deepen with every gesture, every word. She had turned ordinary moments into demonstrations of integrity and strength, showing that leadership and fairness could coexist with warmth and humility. As the afternoon sun moved across the sky, Daniel and Emily took a walk around their property, checking the fences, the flowers, and the driveway, not because there was a problem, but because caring for their home had become a shared ritual, a way to honor the calm and order they had worked so hard to maintain. Each flower bed, each neatly trimmed bush, each clean pathway reminded Daniel of the teamwork and trust that had carried them through challenges. Later, they returned to the porch, settling into their chairs with cups of tea as the neighborhood gradually quieted. The sky was painted in soft hues of orange and pink, a gentle reminder that even after tension and uncertainty, beauty and peace could be found. Daniel reflected on how the past events had transformed their perspective. Respect is earned, not demanded, calm authority is more effective than confrontation, and facing challenges together strengthens relationships in ways nothing else can. Emily, sensing his thoughts, reached out to hold his hand, and they sat quietly, sharing a comfortable silence filled with gratitude, understanding, and love. As night descended, stars began to appear, twinkling above Maplewood, and Daniel felt a deep sense of security and belonging. Their home, once just a place to live, had become a symbol of fairness, courage, and partnership. He realized that the respect they had earned from neighbors and even from the HOA came not from arguing or showing anger, but from demonstrating knowledge, composure, and the willingness to stand together through challenges. Emily rested her head on his shoulder, and Daniel felt a calm happiness settle over him, knowing that whatever future challenges arose, whether minor complaints, misunderstandings, or unexpected visits, they had the strength, trust, and unity to handle them with grace. Together, they had turned potential conflict into lessons of understanding, leaving a quiet mark on the neighborhood that would not be forgotten. The streets of Maplewood were now filled with subtle warmth and respect, and Daniel understood that their actions had set a positive tone for the community. He looked around at the home they had nurtured, the garden blooming in orderly rows, the fences standing tall and neat, and he felt a profound sense of accomplishment, not in material things, but in the trust, love, and confidence shared between him and Emily. They had faced the unknown, remained steady in their principles, and inspired others through their calm strength and kindness. As the night deepened and the quiet of the neighborhood settled in, Daniel and Emily remained on the porch, holding hands, sharing smiles, and savoring the peace that comes from unity and integrity. The events that had begun with a simple knock on the door had evolved into lessons about life, partnership, and community, reminding them that the true measure of a home is not in rules alone, but in the courage, patience, and love that fill it every day. And as the stars shone above Maplewood, Daniel knew that with Emily by his side, there was no challenge too small or too large that they could not face together, confident, calm, and unshakable, ready to embrace the future with trust in each other and in the strength of the life they had built together.